and of course he is the CEO of Activate Africa. And before I talk to my colleague, we're talking about the welfare of an employee in terms of the food. So how can an employer ensure that the employee gets food, affordable food, and food that is really nutritious?
So in 2014, the Kenya government realized that it is important for employees to go ahead and start feeding their employees to help drive productivity and grow GDP within the country. So the government went ahead and allowed for every employer to give their employees 48,000 shillings worth of food as a tax-free benefit to the employee. So there is an incentive for employers to go ahead and feed firstly. The employer has three options in how to go ahead and feed the employee. The first one is to go ahead and open their own kitchen or canteen. The second one is to employ a caterer to come in and bring the food to the employee. Or the third one is to allow the employee to go in and out and bring those receipts back and be compliant with the law.
But all this at the expense of the employer? At
the expense of the employer, correct. But remember, it is an expense for the employer. But what we have seen in Kenya is that when the employer starts feeding the employee, there is a reduction in absenteeism because you're giving a nutritious meal to the employee. And in some companies, we've seen up to a 50% reduction in absenteeism, an increase in productivity. In some companies, we've seen up to a 20% increase in productivity when the employer starts feeding the employee. We've seen high retention rates. And even in companies like a law firm, the partners have come back and told us that when we start feeding the employee, we end up seeing better quality work from the junior advocates. So yes, it is a cost, but I think we need to look at it in a bigger picture of what is the return on investment. Will it end up driving profitability? If it will, then it makes sense to feed the employee.
Okay, and according to a report, according to the ILO study, it shows that at least 70% of employees do not love their jobs. 70 is such a huge number. Then it means only 30% love their jobs. And of course, it goes ahead to say that 10% love their jobs, while the rest like their jobs. So there's a difference. 70% is a huge number. So what makes this 70% of employees not to like their job?
So again, it depends on which generation you're in, and let's talk about the millennials because that's the generation that's entering into the job now. So in generally, a millennial is committed to the community, and if you can show the millennial that they have a bigger their job gives them a bigger purpose in life, if their job allows them flexibility, then they go ahead and start liking their jobs. Very soon we're going to see that will be the days when you have to report to 8 and leave at 5. In our particular company, it doesn't matter what time you come to work, it doesn't matter what time you leave. What's important is that you get your job done. And giving that flexibility to a millennial will go ahead and get them to like their jobs. In the if we go through to the other two generations that are currently working, if we talk about Generation X is committed to their career. So if you can motivate them by helping them to grow in their career, then they're going to be motivated in their jobs. And what we need to get the HR community in Kenya to start doing is to stop being a personnel manager or an admin manager and start thinking strategically about how HR can help drive the organization forward.
And the other thing is that some employees feel unappreciated by the employers. I mean, how do employees want their employers to appreciate them? Is it just by recognizing them, giving them certificates, sending emails, this is the best employee of the year, or this is the best employee in terms of being social or delivering in terms of productivity?
The easiest thing to do, and the one that has the biggest impact, is probably to come and say, Brenda, thank you very much for the job well done. And do that in public. So everyone else can recognize that you've done a good job.
So it shouldn't be like a private thing, your employer calling you, have a sit down and say, you've done a good job.
The bigger impact, you can do the same thing out in front of the other employees. It takes the same amount of time, but it has much bigger impact when your other employee, your co-workers come to you and say, hey, Brenda, well done as well, and you're recognized in front of others.
Let's talk about the app that you have right now in terms of Activate. What is the app actually meant for, and how is it helping the welfare of employees in a company?
So when employers want to go and feed their employees, I mentioned earlier, one of the ways is to get your own kitchen. The second way is to get a caterer. Getting your own kitchen has its own headaches in terms of trying to manage that when it's not your core business. Getting a caterer has its issues in managing and also issues in reconciliation, who ate, who didn't eat, and there's also possibilities of fraud. So what we did is we created an app where the employer will put money into a wallet for each employee in the organization. The employee will go to a kibanda or to a restaurant within the vicinity of where he or she works, or get the food delivered to them in the office and pay using the app in a manner very similar to M-Pesa. So in essence now the employer has provided you with lunch without physically having to provide the lunch for you. We've taken all those headaches away from the employer so the employer can focus on their core business, yet make it very easy to go ahead and feed the employee in a fraud-free way, in an efficient way, and in a way that complies with the KRA regulations for it to be a tax-free benefit.
Okay, and as we bring this conversation to an end, Neil, it is that probably, the working relationship between an employer and employee has always been a major concern, and especially probably when you're correcting your employee, how should you go about it? And what sort of relationship should be there?
It needs to be frank. It needs to be non-sugar-coated. We're dealing with adults here. To tell the adults, this was the expectation. You do not live to the expectation in this case. It needs to be constructive, to where the employer and the employee sit together and agree on the plan of how to make sure that this doesn't happen again, or if necessary, how the behavior will change going forward, and agree on a date when it will be reviewed to make sure that it happens. I think what happens is we bring a lot of emotion into this because it's not necessarily a comfortable discussion to have. So either the employer will shy away from doing it until it becomes very bad, or the employer comes with a lot of emotion in it and yells at the employee, and at the end of the meeting there's no constructive discussion to fix the problem.
All right, thank you so much. That is Neil Ribeiro, the CEO of Activate Africa.